All right, welcome to the AdaptX podcast, where we have conversations with individuals building accessible businesses, advocating for inclusion, or excelling in adaptive sports. Our intention is never to speak on behalf of those with disabilities, but to provide a platform to share their voice and amplify their ideas to a more inclusive world. Today, I'm joined by David Figueroa. David is a highly accomplished motivational speaker, advocate, podcaster, educator, and athlete. As a person with CP, cerebral palsy, David has faced numerous challenges and obstacles throughout his life. However, he has successfully embraced his condition and become a source of inspiration and hope for numerous individuals. David, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast. It's an honor for you to reach out to me to be on here, and I'm hoping to enlighten a lot of people with my knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's maybe share with the audience how CP presents for you. So what level or what GMFCS level of CP you have?
So I was born a spastic quadriplegic, so I was it basically affects all four quadrants, so arms and legs, and I was told I would never be able to be able to walk at all by doctors early on, and thankfully with surgeries and by determination and really wanting to excel alongside having a good support system, I was able to overcome that.
So your mobility, do you use a wheelchair? Do you use lobster and crutches?
Right. I used a wheelchair full time until I was 8, and then I transitioned to a walker. And a little bit after that, I just used the cane and the power chair or a wheelchair every so often whenever there's long distances.
Okay. So what was involved in that transition from a wheelchair to something like crutches or a cane? Was fitness and just activity levels essential to that transition?
At the beginning, it was a lot of physical therapy, but then it was as I got older, it was more of like you need to start taking responsibility for your health because that determines your own life. If you don't take responsibility for yourself, then how are you going to become independent? Be able to live a normal life on your own. So that I made that decision when I was 15, 16. I told myself, I got to stop being sedentary. I got to start moving. So that's where a lot of being involved in sports. I was involved in baseball. Uh, it was a challenger league, which was for kids with different disabilities, and then I got involved also in football. That was pretty much the same aspect. So what the leagues entail is you have all these kids and all these individuals with different disabilities, but then you have a buddy system. You better pair them up with a buddy. In terms that buddy kind of helps them, redirect them in how to play the sport, or if they can't catch something like a ball or something, they'll catch it for them and they'll help them complete the play and just be there for them, as a sense of like support.
Yeah, Challenger Baseball was one of the first organizations I got involved with as well that highly influenced like the career I wanted to pursue and just my passion for inclusion as a whole. What do you think the role of adaptive sports in a community is in you accepting and appreciating your diagnosis and I guess still being comfortable in your own skin and developing relationships with peers?
That is like really great question, a little loaded, but it's actually great because I feel like it's so underappreciated, like these organizations, because you don't really hear much about adaptive sports, especially here where I live. I don't know where you're from, but I'm from Florida. Florida, you hear about adaptive sports in like Tampa and like those bigger cities, Miami. Like for me, a couple years ago, no, this was give or take 13 years ago. I was about to graduate high school, and prior to, I was doing cycling, and I was a three-time state champion cyclist in the state of Florida with the Special Olympics. But I was graduating high school, and there were talks about me eventually jumping into doing the Paralympics, and I got invited to their facility up in Tampa, and I got to tour it, and it was a beautiful facility. And they're like, we want you to be a part of a banquet. You get all the you'll be able to study and then compete at the same time, and then have sponsorships and all this good stuff. And at the time, I just graduated high school, and my body was like, no, I can't do this anymore. Because I went through all three sports and I was going through a lot of injuries towards the tail end of my cycling. And so I was like, should I go for it and accept all these sponsorships and this money and this opportunity, or should I walk away and go to school and be content with myself? And I chose to walk away. And people are like, "You're nuts! Yeah, all this coming for you." I'm like, you know, when your body says you can't do it anymore, you can't do it anymore. It's. But in terms of your question, yes, it is underappreciated, and I feel like there should be more exposure to it, and it really brings everybody together.
Yeah, absolutely. The communal aspect is essential, and that's what we've tried to replicate at our gym as well. I mean, unified sports influenced my career path, and then it influenced my business name, like our gym's Unified Health and Performance. So it had a large impact on that as well. So definitely essential, and I think the role of fitness can be pretty similar in that regard. So what was it like growing up where you lived with a disability? Were schools inclusive? Were you able to find a good friend group?
Well, I actually started school in Puerto Rico. I went to
Okay.
school in Puerto Rico for about 8 years, and they weren't very inclusive at all. Like all the facilities, teachers were very like they didn't really like me being in their classroom because I was kind of set apart from other kids because I walked differently, I talked differently, and they didn't want anything to do with me. Even though I made straight A's in all the classes, I did everything I had to do, even if I had to have an aide at the time. But they were like, "Nah, we don't want him here. He's too slow." And that's what at the time I was living with my stepmom, now mom, and my dad, and my stepmom, now mom, took it to heart. She's like, "They can't treat my son like this." She went and took the student file that they had at the office, tore it up, and said, "We're coming to Florida." I got here, things started to open up a lot more as far as more opportunities. Of course, I started sports over there in Puerto Rico because as I started in the very first league in my hometown there for baseball for kids with disabilities. I was the poster child. So everybody, I was pretty much famous around town. Everybody knew who I was, and it was pretty cool. I mean, to be 8 years old and be recognized as the kid who started that league and was the face of it, and coming here, playing baseball until 2007, and then of course my education was a lot better here. It was a lot more, more welcoming and more inclusive. Of course, you had your few bumps on the road where teachers were like, "What can we do for this child, and how can we assist him?" And that's where my mom, now, she came in and she taught me it's all about advocating for yourself. You have to tell people what you have, how it makes you different, and how it makes you unique. And when they understand you, that's how they learn and how they appreciate you and how they're willing to assist you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that echoes an important point that I can know as much as possible about cerebral palsy, but the best way to know how to help you is to ask you. No one knows your diagnosis better than you. No one knows your support needs better than you. But there's still that like fear and concern that sometimes people have about talking about disability or talking with someone with a disability. Do you have any advice into kind of how to alleviate some of that? Like, maybe for example, let's just do a scenario. So if you were to walk into my gym for the first time, what would you want me to ask you about your disability?
Well, for me, is what can you do? What are your limitations, and what can't and you can't do, and how can I make it more accessible for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So less about the specific characteristics of the diagnosis and more about how it manifests through ability and opportunity.
Right, right. And of course, you'll have those moments where people do ask about, your disability, and you know the differences between a child and an adult. You have to approach it differently. Like a child, they're still learning. They're still trying to understand, process it, and this is a moment where you could teach them, one on one. being a former educator myself, I dealt with a lot of that too. Like I had to teach my students about me. The same way I was learning about them. And the same thing with adults. Adults, you know, they can be taught, but it's very different because they've seen it and they have some sense of understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually an interesting point. Like kids are learning about disability as they go. Was there also a similar period for you kind of learning about your diagnosis and coming to terms with your diagnosis? Were you ever resentful?
Oh yeah, there are times where I felt resentful, but then I realized, this is a part of you. It'll always be a part of you, and if no one else can accept it, at least you do, and be proud of it, and be proud of yourself.
We are grateful for the support of our first show sponsor. Resolution Fitness offers leading brand health club equipment and accessories for residential and commercial use. In addition to traditional exercise equipment, they specialize in adaptive fitness products and wheelchair accessible machines. If you're interested in outfitting your fitness facility or home gym to be more accessible, visit www.resolutionfitness.ca or the link in the show notes below. Yeah, absolutely. So you got through high school in the States here, and then you went on to university. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about where you went to school, what you studied, and what that experience was like?
I went to UCF and I studied sociology, and I had a pretty good experience. It was very interesting because UCF is one of the largest campuses in the United States, and getting around it was was very interesting. I had to learn all the shortcuts. Of course, the shuttles were my best friend getting around campus. One of the things that I disliked about it, and this is something that I was trying to really push, was to have the opportunity to have people like in golf carts or staff members pick up students that have different disabilities. And but I learned the hard way by getting on a golf cart. One of the members of the staff was like, "I'll do it for you. Technically I'm not supposed to do this, but I want to help you." And he was very wonderful, and to this day I'm very grateful for him. But they were like, by you getting on this golf cart, you're a liability, you're this, you're that. I'm like, if a student can get on a shuttle and take it around campus, but sometimes they're too far, and sometimes students can't afford, a power chair or a scooter or even a manual chair to get around campus. And how else are they going to? And one of the things I proposed that never went through was, if you are a part of student services, you have a documented disability. Why not have your student ID, there, and it's documented, hey, I need help getting around campus. And if you have a certain ID or a certain badge, you can show the staff there in golf carts or whatever that you have a documented disability. And of course, find a way to make the golf cart accessible. Like if they have a chair or if they have something that they can't carry by themselves, make it accessible so that they can put it on there and they can ride with you. Of course, you can make the golf cart to where you can have doors or something to where they don't fall off, and have seatbelts, because that's what they're made for. Seatbelts are, and this is not a PSA, by the way, but seatbelts save lives. Put seatbelts on golf carts. Make it as accessible as possible, and by doing that, you're promoting more inclusivity and more opportunities for students to be successful. Because I can tell you a handful of times where I had an exam and I had to go across campus, and I had a certain amount of time, and by the time I got there, I was exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, not only the accessibility, but I guess that underappreciates how much more energy expenditure it requires for someone with CP to ambulate. Something like 3 to 5 times as much of a metabolic
Yeah.
cost of exercise as it does for someone without. So,
Yeah.
not only the speed, but also just the energy demand. I mean, you get to class probably depleted.
Oh yeah, and I spent full days there from I used to get up at 4:30 in the morning, take a 3-hour bus ride, and be at the first class by 7:30 in the morning, and I was there till 8 o'clock at night.
Wow. Yeah, that's dedication to your education. I can appreciate that for sure.
Yeah,
What
that
uh what
was
influenced what
yeah.
influenced you to study sociology?
Well, it was primarily all my life experiences, that were encompassed, like dealing with a lot of, you know, trying to accept myself and find myself. And I'm like, I have to use my ability to help. I like to use my ability to help people. And that's what I'm doing nowadays is just sharing my story, sharing my journey on not just this platform, but my own, and bringing other people with different disabilities and obstacles on my show and letting them share their stories. And so by doing that, I'm just not helping just myself, but helping others too.
Absolutely. When you go to a keynote speech or a presentation, what do you hope that the audience takes away from it?
That they can achieve what they want to achieve if they really put in the work for it. That's as simple as that. And believe in yourself. Always believe in yourself, no matter what.
How do you go into those presentations and prepare for them? Do you come with a speech that you practice, or do you have a set of talking points?
I do. I make PowerPoints actually. So mine is very visual. I try to get the crowd involved. So I have like little activities here or there to kind of, make people think or like make them really, get involved, something fun. I like to have some crowd interaction, versus just me talking. Because when you spend time talking for like 20, 30 minutes, you're bound to lose engagement. There's no like what can this guy bring to bring engagement? And as long as you keep your crowd engaged, they'll want to keep watching you and want to keep listening to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that's tough as I start to do some more public speaking, is just making sure that you're tailoring a presentation to the audience and finding ways to break up the monotony of speaking and kind of, like you said, fostering that engagement. It's tough. The discussion prompts and trying to get people to engage. Sometimes people are hesitant in an audience to kind of speak up.
I mean, I'll bring up a lot of like my fitness videos, talk about that. I've done fitness seminars before, and I've been able to really keep the crowd engaged. And I also post a couple of my, football videos. And they're like, oh, Mr. David, you played football? I'm like, yeah, of course. And like, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? And then, I bring up I was the size of a water bottle. So I usually bring like a water bottle to share with the class. And I'm like, okay, so if anybody can guess why I have this water bottle here, I'll give them like a piece of candy or something. And when I tell them the true significance and the meaning of that bottle, they're like, "Whoa, for real?" And I tell them that I was that size. I was the size of a water bottle. They're like, "No way!" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's true." You know?
Well, speaking of fitness, I guess this is a good transition point to that conversation. Since our audience is ideally fitness professionals, and that's who we want to speak to and kind of help the industry become more inclusive and accessible, what do you think fitness environments, gyms need to do to better accommodate people with disabilities?
Listen to your members. Your members that have disabilities, they have a lot of insight and they offer a lot of knowledge and resource as to how you can improve a gym. Simple as that because it's like these documentaries that they do with specific athletes, like docuseries, especially with athletes that have different disabilities. You know how they tend to have actors that don't have disabilities or are able-bodied, but they're not really. They might be playing the role, but they're not essentially. They don't know what it's like physically. And this is the thing with gyms is you're not going to really get change unless you listen to those members that have those specific disabilities. Target that demographic. When you target that demographic and you ask them, "Hey, how can we help? How can we help foster this, make it more inclusive?" Speak to them. You know, have
Yeah.
meetings. Conduct surveys. Uh, speak to them directly. I personally love when somebody speaks to me directly and says, "How can I improve something for you?" or how can I make something? How can I help you understand what I have? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you think of any of like the low hanging fruit that a gym could maybe address to make the environment or the services more accessible? Just like, have you seen any gyms do inclusion well?
Where I used to go, no, not really. I could say this because the doors weren't they weren't any automatic opening doors. The locker room was not really accessible. Like I would sit down, try to change my shoes or something, and I had to literally sit on the floor just to get my shoes on or something, or just to be able to get dressed. And the lockers are hard to close or to even open, because I only have use of really one hand. So even that was difficult. And then if you're going to the showers, for example, like, you go in there and there's not much of a railing or something to hold on to, or even a chair, to sit on if you're somebody that can't really stand for long periods of time, but you still want to, wash off or like, rinse off or something.
Yeah, so looking at the entire experience, not just the gym equipment, but also bathrooms, showers, even like front desk. And I mean, obviously, if you can't enter the building, you can't use the building. So addressing those key accessibility standards for entrances and doors is the first step. But then, kind of beyond that, I guess, have you had any good experiences like with fitness professionals?
Oh yeah, there was this guy, or this trainer, rest in peace to him. He was such a wonderful guy. Um, when I first started going to the gym, he actually approached me, and he was very friendly. And he's like, what, David? I've been learning a lot about cerebral palsy and different disabilities. I want to be a personal trainer for those with different disabilities. And the first question he asked me, which is something that we discussed earlier, was, how can I make this experience more accommodating for you? How can I help you train and get fit? And so we started working together for a couple years. And unfortunately, he ended up passing away very young, at a very young age, at 29, from a heart attack. And, but I took everything they taught me to heart, and I still use it to this day. And that's the thing too, is a lot of these gyms need to have not just trainers working with able-bodied individuals, but trainers that are equipped to help assist and teach those with physical disabilities how to train properly, and how to get in shape. And that's really important too. Don't neglect the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we're like we emphasize education for the trainer instead of the individual. So our content is less curated to like, okay, you have cerebral palsy, you should do XYZ, but it's more so to educate the fitness staff so they're more comfortable and competent in working with people with disabilities. So when you do enter that gym, you're greeted with a welcoming environment and a professional that can support those needs that you have. So just teaching fitness professionals, personal trainers, physical therapists, strength and conditioning coaches about like disability etiquette, communication strategies, expectations. And like you said, at the end of the day, the best way to learn is just to have communication and to have conversations with people with disabilities and learn how they need to be supported instead of implying that you know. So I think that's just, I mean, that's a pretty consistent takeaway that we found when having these conversations.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I think, and the main thing about this is you have to keep it going. You can't stop. Once you start something, don't quit. Just keep it going, and eventually it'll stick. Just
Yeah.
like what we're doing now, educating the public on disabilities and fitness. We have to keep it going. We can't stop.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned inspiration in your bio. Inspiration porn and kind of this narrative of people with disabilities as overcoming challenges is a pretty prevalent one. What do you think about people calling you inspirational?
Well, honestly, I mean, first and foremost, I'm flattered that people think I'm an inspiration. But um, at the end of the day, we're all human. We all do things just like everybody else. I go to work. I I pay rent. I have my own pet, I take care of. That's like my son who was barking earlier. um, and it's one of those things. You have to treat somebody with disability just like they're treating you, just like they're human. Just they might look different, they might act different, but at the end of the day, they're just human like everybody else, and they just want to feel accepted in society.
Yeah, that dog's just passionate about inclusion and accessibility. Just wanted to be a part of the episode. That's all. If people are interested in listening to your podcast or learning more about you, where would you recommend that they find you? And we could include it in the show notes. But
You can find me on Instagram at David CP Fitness. You can find me on Twitter at David CP Fitness. And if you guys would like to listen to the podcast itself, it's the David Cerebral Palsy and Fitness podcast.
Awesome. Well, David, I've enjoyed learning from you over the years. I'm glad we finally got the chance to connect and have a little bit of a conversation today, and look forward to sharing this with our audience.
Definitely. It was a pleasure. And thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you for listening to the AdaptX podcast. Our effort to amplify the ideas of our guests and create more inclusive and accessible industries is futile unless these episodes reach a larger audience. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please leave us a rating or a review on whichever platform you use. And if you would like to learn more about AdaptX, the course that we teach to health and fitness professionals and the projects that our organization is working on, you can subscribe to our newsletter through our website, www.adaptx.org. Until next Monday.